Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Okay, let's get started. So, method of reasoning. First thing about method of reasoning questions is that we don't care how good the arguments are, we just care about the logical flow of the arguments. So, it's all about the structure. Don't get caught up in the plot holes as much. It's just you inspect the structure, and if you have a good idea of how it works, then you'll be able to do well. And then I always recommend like identifying your premises and your conclusions because it will really make things easier to understand and harder to mess up. But especially for these, because we're not assessing the strength of the arguments, knowing the parts is so important. Like that's so much of it. So if you are a bit lazy about that, this is the last sort of question that I would skip that on. We are going to do 6 examples, so 3 sort of classics and then 3 with the bold face, so we can kind of see both. You will get, I will throw up the question. They're all from Target Test Prep, and you will get a couple minutes to work through and pick your answer, and then we'll talk through the answers and any questions you have about why any of the other choices were wrong. And then if you do have some more general questions, or if we go through all the examples and you want to revisit something that we didn't talk about enough, then there will be a little bit of time at the end. So let's get started. Here is the first example. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to pick an answer, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, I see you. Some of you have an idea. Awesome. So, Eleni, most of the owners of hybrid cars, whom I know, are much healthier than the average person. I guess in order to be healthy, I should get a hybrid car rather than a typical internal combustion engine only car. And Lee, people who drive hybrid cars tend to be concerned about ecology, so it's likely that, on average, they travel by bicycle more than the average person does, and include in their diets more locally grown organic fruits and vegetables than the average person includes. So I doubt that your choice will make any difference. So I'm going to look at a breakdown I did. So basically, Eleni's like, I should get this car because people that own a car that's a hybrid are healthier than average. And Lee's like, that's kind of a silly conclusion. Have you thought about these things? It looks like D was popular. Yes, that's pretty accurate. So Lee responds to Eleni's conclusion that she must get a hybrid to improve her health by mentioning that owning a hybrid often goes hand in hand with several other health promoting activities, and that perhaps those other activities contribute to Eleni's observed premise. Correlation is not causation. I cannot stress that enough. That one's pretty easy. I did kind of a mix of difficulty, so they tend to get a bit harder, but again, your personal experiences and skills will somewhat dictate how hard you find the questions. But I feel like we all kind of agree on that one. So, no, there is a question. Okay, so why not E? Because Eleni's like, hey, I know people that are healthier than average. They have this thing in common. They own hybrid cars. I want to be healthy, so I'm gonna get a hybrid car. And Lee's like, they probably do other things. Now, if he was like, hey, Eleni, instead of getting a hybrid car, have you thought about like fruits and vegetables and biking more? That would be E. But he doesn't tell her to do other things. He tells her that the things that the thing that she thinks these people have in common, the hybrid car thing, might just be a correlated activity with things that are separately promoting their health. Any other comments? So, um, he doesn't really he doesn't exactly question her premise. He offers with cause and effect arguments, it's there's a few different ways to like degrade the relationship. And so one of the ways is like offering up other things that could have caused the effect, which is what he's doing. But he doesn't really question her premise directly. It's a bit nuanced, but let's see. I had some notes over here. Give me a second. So he doesn't exactly provide a reason to question her premise. He just says, hey, there's some other things that you should consider. He doesn't call up part of the argument, he provides additional information. Okay, cool. Let's check out the next one. And 2 minutes. Okie doke, a bit of discourse. Prison sentences are meant to reduce crime by serving as a disincentive to engage in crime. Thus, in theory, the threat of longer prison sentences should reduce crime more than does the threat of shorter prison sentences. However, studies have shown that young people age 18 or older are not significantly less likely to commit crimes than are people just under 18, even though sentences are generally significantly longer for criminals aged 18 and over than they are for criminals under age 18. Apparently, the threat of longer prison sentences does not have a material crime reducing effect. Let's see. Choices. So let's look at our breakdown and then we'll come back and look at the choices. So prison sentences are intended to reduce crime by acting as a disincentive. Theoretically, longer prison sentences should serve as a stronger disincentive, and shorter sentences should serve as a less strong disincentive. And yet, here are these two groups of people separated by an 18th birthday doing the same thing and experiencing relatively longer or shorter prison sentences as punishment. So the conclusion is the threat of longer prison sentences doesn't have a material crime reducing effect. So A, using key differences between the actions of two groups of people categorized by age to eliminate a phenomenon. By definition, they are not committing different actions. They are committing the same action. The consequences are different, so this one doesn't work. B, demonstrating the lack of the effect of a factor by comparing situations that include and do not include that factor. This is the difference. So the conclusion is that longer prison sentences don't seem to have a material crime reducing effect, and they compare it by, and they demonstrate it by comparing a situation that includes a longer prison sentence versus a situation that does not. And the behaviors are like similarly frequent. And then E was also one. So this is a bit like the last one. The questioning support for a hypothesis by showing that the data used to support the hypothesis is skewed. So in situations where they talk about so-and-so argues against, so-and-so questions something, there has to be like an objective question. Even if it feels like there's kind of a question, that's not enough. The person would have to actively be like questioning the situation. And so that's where some of the nuance in language, it's very particular that they will articulate things in a lot of different ways, but they have to match word for word. And so here, even though it seems like they are saying, like, does this have an effect? There's not an actual question posed, and that's why E does not work. B, I believe, is the answer. Let's see. Yes, the passage demonstrates the longer sentences don't have a significant crime reducing effect by showing that a situation where the factor, longer sentences, is present doesn't differ from a situation where it's not present. Since young 18-year-old people are no less likely to commit crimes than sub-18-year-old people, even though they're facing longer prison sentences, if caught, the factor doesn't have a demonstrable effect on behavior. Any questions on that one? Let's see here. And then also use this. Let's look. That's a good point. The data isn't supporting. Yeah, it's not showing that data is skewed because the data supports their conclusion. And then, yeah, the situations that are compared are these two people on either side of a birthday are having different consequences, but they are, and the common belief is that more severe consequences will act as a disincentive, but there's no significant difference between the people that have the more severe disincentive and the people that have the less severe disincentive. That 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds are doing these crimes at the same rate, essentially. Okay. I think we're good and we can move on. If you have any other questions, we can definitely come back to it. But let's look at example E. And I'll give you a couple minutes. What that is doing. Okay, let's look at it. City planners have traditionally sought ways to make cities, there's like, okay. City planners have traditionally sought ways to make cities more accessible to drivers by building parking garages and lots of valuable city real estate. However, doing so limits the space available for businesses that provide entertainment and leisure activities. Now, city planners are ignoring the preferences of automobile drivers in favor of accommodating alternate forms of transportation. This approach is more aligned with the lifestyle of urban residents who want the most out of their entertainment and amenities within walking, or want most of their entertainment and amenities within walking or cycling distance. Which of the following statements made by a city planner best illustrates the reasoning that underlies the change in the policy described in the above argument? Hold on, let me double check one of these words. Okay, nope, that's right. Okay, there was a few different choices, so let's look at them. Okay, let's look at E. Parking lots are unattractive and waste valuable space that could be used by retailers and other businesses that will generate more tax revenue. Okay, so let's do our breakdown and then we'll come back. So in the past, city planners sought ways to make cities more accessible to drivers by building parking options. Building parking garages and lots limits the space available for businesses that provide things people want to do. Now, city planners are ignoring the preferences of auto owners in favor of accommodating other forms of transportation. Urban residents who want most of their entertainment amenities within walking or cycling distance. And then the conclusion is the planner's new approach is more aligned with the lifestyles of urban residents. So, while E is certainly a statement that could be made, it doesn't. E is anti-parking lots, and they're kind of anti-parking lots here, but it doesn't address the part of the conclusion that's about alternate forms of transportation. So they have gone from accommodating the preferences of auto drivers to accommodating alternate forms of transportation because they're trying to be more aligned with the lifestyles of urban residents. So yeah, while you can make the case that parking lots are unattractive, it doesn't best illustrate the reasoning. It's not just that parking lots are unattractive, it's that we've got to connect it to the lifestyles of the urban residents that they're wanting to cater more to. C was popular. New bicycle sharing systems reduce the parking lot space necessary to support commerce in this area, thereby opening up valuable real estate for use by restaurants and shops. Okay, this does two things. Well, first, it brings in some new information, new bicycle sharing systems, and that can be a little bit spooky, but it's a bit more common on method of reasoning to bring in new information like this than it is on some question types. They reduce the parking lot space necessary. Great. They're trying to do that. To support commerce in the area. Great. Thereby opening up valuable real estate for use by restaurants and shops, which is what these urban residents want within walking or cycling distance. So this one pretty clearly illustrates the reasoning that underlines the policy change. Let's see, what else did we have? D. So D is tempting because of assumptions about the type of people that live in city centers, because yeah, typically it's gonna be younger people. And there's another one. The let's see. Okay, so this one and this one, B and D, both kind of play on this assumption that the type of people that typically live in urban areas are going to be younger people that don't drive, because it's cumbersome in the real world typically to have a car. And also, like, the older you get and as your family grows, you're probably going to move out to the suburbs. That's the stereotype. Here's the deal. That isn't part of this argument. That is just like a lived experience. Like, that's certainly my experience with cities, and very common. So both B and D try to tempt you by having you bring your preconceived notions into the question, but you have to be very careful to not do so. Let's see. I don't think anyone did anything else. So C, I believe, is going to be the best choice. Let's look here. Yes. A critiques auto ownership but doesn't address the reallocation of space. B talks about taxpayers versus suburban preferences, but it wasn't established where the auto owners were coming from. D mentions attracting young people, but doesn't specify what their mode of transportation would be. That's the other thing. And they could still drive autos. And then E criticizes parking lots, but doesn't mention alternative transportation forms. Okay. So we are, so the new info on C, what I'm saying is that that to me, when I did this one the first time, it like put me off a little bit, but it still works. Now, some question types are going to be not so friendly to the new information, but method of reasoning is a little bit more flexible. So it's not an all or nothing. Like sometimes it's suspicious, especially for like comparisons. I would be very suspicious of new information, but in this one, they throw in the bike sharing system, which is new information, but the argument does talk about how urban residents want most of their amenities within walking or cycling distance. So it's not so out of pocket, but I do see why that one would put people off because when I read through this one the first time, I was like, oh, I do not know about that. But I think a big trick of these questions is it's not that like the best answer is going to be super great all the time. It's that you rule out the other answers for valid reasons. So if you rule out the other answers for valid reasons and then you're left with one that you can't rule out for a valid reason, then that's probably going to be your best answer. But yes, that is a good point. Okay, we're going to switch a little bit and do some boldface examples. So here. Okay, here you are. I will give you a couple minutes. Ah, sorry. Okay. In recent years, so many people have been opting to attend college that the number of college graduates now exceeds the number of employment positions that require college educations. Some people, therefore, have made the case that much of the large investment that has been made in college education will not earn returns in terms of increased productivity. This assessment is incorrect, however, as in many positions that do not require college education, people who have knowledge gained through college education are generally more productive than are those without college education in the same positions. So, there's a couple of things that I would point out here before we proceed. One is investments that had been made in college education will not earn returns in terms of increased productivity. So, not in terms of like financial payoff, specifically in terms of increased productivity. And then the other thing that I think is fun with this one is that it has kind of a stealthy conclusion. And so I like those to mix things up. But let's see. It seems like D was pretty popular. Let's look at our breakdown. So recently, so many people have been attending college that the number of graduates now exceeds the number of positions that require a college education. And then the conclusion the author opposes, some people have made the case that much of the large investment in college education will not earn returns in terms of increased productivity. The author's conclusion, this assessment is incorrect. So here's these people, they're saying this. The author is disagreeing with them. And then this is how they support their conclusion, which is just that these people are wrong. Let's look through choices. So D is, the first is a position that the argument opposes. It is. The second is evidence used to support the argument's conclusion. Yes. So this is the conclusion the argument opposes, and then this is the support for the argument's conclusion. Also saw C. The first is a judgment advance in support of a position that the argument opposes. It isn't a judgment. It is the position. That, I think, is kind of tricky language. And then the second is not the argument's conclusion. It is support for the conclusion. Do we have any others? Just those two. Pretty on the same page on this one. So yeah, I'm thinking it is D. Let's see. Oh, yes. So first part, yes, a position that the argument opposes, and second part is the evidence used to support the argument's conclusion. That one was pretty easy. All right, next. All right, let's work through this one. A recent study showed a correlation between the quality of wine and the price of wine. While these results indicate that generally a winery is improving the quality of its wine will enable that winery to increase the price it receives per bottle, it would be wrong to conclude from the existence of this pattern that a winery will benefit financially from improving the quality of its wine. There are costs to improving wine quality, such as the extra expense of high quality grapes, money spent on new technology, and salaries of top notch winemakers. And therefore, wineries that improve wine quality often see lower return on investment than are seen by wineries that produce wine of lower quality. So, this one is kind of deliberately tricky as well. Um, because you have to identify the conclusion correctly, and I think that it can be hard to do. It is, let's look at our breakdown. Okay, so the conclusion is here. It would be wrong to conclude from the existence of this pattern that a winery will benefit financially from improving the quality of its wine. And then the support is in the last couple of sentences of the passage about the costs, and then they often see a lower return on investment. Then this is in response to this conclusion that the author opposes clearly. They say it would be wrong to conclude that a winery will benefit financially from improving the quality of its wine. And then there's an intermediate conclusion. A winery's improving the quality of its wine will enable that winery to increase the price it receives per bottle. And support for the intermediate conclusion is a recent study showed a correlation between the quality of wine and the price of wine. So let's look at some choices. Be super popular. The first is a pattern that could be taken as support for a conclusion to which the main conclusion is in opposition. All right, that's pretty reasonable. The second is the main conclusion. It is not. It is support for the main conclusion. So B does not work. C, a couple of people said the first to be taken as support for a conclusion that the main conclusion opposes. Yeah. And then the second provides support for the main conclusion. Yeah, it does. So C looks pretty good. Did we have any other guesses? No? So I'm thinking it's C. Check. Yes. First, a winery is improving the quality of its wine, will enable the wine. Yes. So could be taken as support for a conclusion. The main conclusion opposes. Yes. And then obviously this is support for the main conclusion. All right. Cool. And then we have one more example if you guys don't have any more questions about that one. All right. Then I'll give you a couple minutes on this one. All right, let's look at this one. Economist. Those against the proliferation of artificial intelligence are misguided. They vehemently argue that when machines can handle most of the jobs that humans must currently perform, global economies will rapidly see the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of modern society. As those limited few who own and operate such smart machines will see their profits soar, while almost all workers in almost all industries will experience rapidly declining incomes and wealth as jobs disappear. However, major studies show that over the next 50 years, artificial intelligence will likely create 50 million more jobs than it destroys as companies begin to rework the division of labor between humans and machines. Let's look at our breakdown. So, the main conclusion is the first bit. Those against the proliferation of artificial intelligence are misguided. And the support, what makes this one a little bit convoluted, is here is your main conclusion. It's this. And then the support isn't until down here. This is your main conclusion. This is something it's arguing against. And then the support for this is all the way down here. So major studies show that over the next 50 years, artificial intelligence will likely create 50 million more jobs than it destroys as companies begin to rework the division of labor between humans and machines. And then the conclusion the author opposes is when machines can handle most of the jobs that humans must currently perform, global economies will rapidly see the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of modern society. And that is supported by those limited few who own and operate such smart machines will see their profits soar, while almost all workers in almost all industries will experience rapidly declining incomes and wealth as jobs disappear. Let's look at our choices. And we'll just work through each of these because I know from the statistics on this one, it can be kind of an evenly divided one. So, the first provides support for the main conclusion of the argument. It does not, because this is the main conclusion of the argument. So A is out. B, the first could be taken as support for a conclusion to which the main conclusion is in opposition. Well, let's see. Okay, and then the second is the main conclusion. It is not. So B does not work for the second part for sure. First part's a little convoluted. C, the first is a conclusion. That is not the only conclusion present in the passage. How incredibly vague. Let's see. The machines can handle. Yeah, all right. And then the second provides support for the argument's main conclusion. Yes, it does. Okay. I like this one. The first is an objection that has been raised against a position defended in the argument. There is no such position, defense, or objection. And then on this one, the first supplies context for the economist's argument. I mean, it technically does supply context. The second is an intermediary conclusion for which the economist provides support. No, the second is the support for their conclusion. So I'm thinking C is the best fit. Let's look. Yes, that looks like C. Did anyone have any questions about the other choices on that one? Okay, cool. Those were my examples. And so if you guys have any question, oh, how was the first conclusion? Let's see here. Okay, so the first is the conclusion of these people. Those against the proliferation of artificial intelligence are misguided, is the author's conclusion. He's talking about they vehemently argue that, and then this is their argument. And this is the conclusion that they oppose. This is the support for why they think that. So premise for opposed conclusion, premise for author's conclusion, author's conclusion. Okay. Those are my examples. If you have other questions, did anyone have anything else? Or we can look back at one, or if you have something else that you would like to discuss, I am at your, I'm available. Okay, burnout. Here's the deal. I guess so. On the burnout thing, one of the most like condescending pieces of advice I ever got that was actually super helpful was, like the things you're supposed to be doing to take care of yourself, like sleeping enough and like eating well and exercising. Are you doing those? Because I personally like know how much sleep I need, but that doesn't mean I always like get that much. But especially if you're studying and stuff like this can be like very taxing. You have really got to be in peak form. So just you've got to prioritize your health basically to the expense of almost everything else, because it's so easy to just like study late into the night and then like hope it pans out, but you're really doing yourself a disservice and your memory a disservice. Mariana, on the framework for the last one, we can go back through that one. Yeah, I'm not super clear what your question is, Mariana. If you would clarify. Recommendations for the last 2 weeks prior to the exam. So I would not schedule your exam until you're pretty happy with where you're at. Like, do not schedule your exam if you like as a motivator for yourself. Be happy with where you're at and then schedule it. Obviously, depending on how flexible the scheduling is, here where I'm at, there was a couple options. So I had I could have scheduled it like the next day if I wanted. But my second piece for the 2 weeks prior is get where you're happy, schedule your exam, and then just like chill out some. That will really help you, because I can tell you that I do these questions obviously like for this, and I also go on GMAT Club and do them. And when I tell you that like they are so much easier for me than they were when I was studying, it is crazy that when I had to do them and I was studying and I was doing them all the time, like I was so in the trenches for it that it just like everything was like much more taxing. And now sometimes I will see them and like it's not like they're never hard, because they absolutely can be difficult, but the just pulling back a little and giving yourself a break can really boost your performance, which is why, again, get where you're happy so you feel confident doing that and pulling back and giving yourself a break. How do I approach critical reasoning questions myself? So kind of what I was saying earlier, have a decent reason for discarding things, and obviously be willing to accept that you are wrong, because you might be. So be flexible about like going back through it, but try to have a concrete reason for ruling things out. Sometimes if you have two unsure answers, I'm a big fan, especially on the new test structure, of like just put a pin in it and come back, because again, I have like pulled up questions. I know when I took my exam, like one of the first questions that I got on a section, probably quant, was like, I was like, yikes, I don't know how to do that. And that is not a good first question start energy. And then I like picked an answer and I bookmarked it and I came back. I was like, oh, okay, like I totally know what's going on here. But sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. Like you've just got to come at it for like a slightly different angle. So big fan of bookmarking, especially if you're still prepping and like you're really unsure, like go do something for 10 minutes, go outside or something and kind of give yourself a reset and then come back. And if you're still struggling, then like make your best guess and reverse engineer from there. There's a lot of reverse engineering before the road to the right answer is going to be strong enough that you can like reliably get there. So recommended framework for approaching this type of question. This type, the main thing on these, because they are so like nitpicky, is I would go through and break down the argument, and then on the bold ones I would like write down what you think they are, because they'll phrase them a few different ways, but if you have an idea of what part it plays, it's much easier to see where it fits. Like that last one where it was like the first is a conclusion that is not the only conclusion present in the passage. Like if you're trying to pre-lay that out, that is never going to be your guess. What a weird, vague phrasing. But that's what they do sometimes, just to throw you off. And so if you know, like, hey, here's my conclusion, here's the conclusion that my author opposes, here's the support for each one, and then you go into the answer choices, it's a lot easier to match them. Can we skip a question without marking any answer option in GMAT? No. You do have to pick an answer, and you can only change 3, but like it's 3 per section, and you do obviously have to fit within the time limit. But like don't be just like real laissez-faire about it, Priyanka. But you can choose up to 3, and there's 23 questions, so like you can change up to 3 of those. That's a fair amount. I would probably, like, if you're just totally overwhelmed, do your best to rule out what you can. You can usually rule out 2 answers pretty easily, often 3 depending on the question, and then make a note in your notebook that you will be able to find later and come back to, or however you want to do it, and pick your best choice and then come back and read it again if you have time. Okay, online GMAT versus GMAT at the test center. I have thoughts, and here they are. I got a perfect score on my GMAT, and I took it at the test center because honestly, I was like worried that my internet would go out or something. I'm kind of like, I always think the worst things will happen. Like I'm an overplanner, but in hindsight, like I'm so glad that I did that, because I hear stories of people all the time where like they do really well and then GMAT cancels their score because they whatever, like they think they were cheating, and you know, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, who's to say. But like when I went to the test center, they took my ID, my federal ID, I believe. They scanned my palm like a fingerprint. They did like 3 palm scans. I had to like sign all this stuff. Like it was really intense. They made me stand in like a particular square so they could get like a bunch of like camera angles on me. I had to roll up all my sleeves and everything. Like it was so dramatic. But I feel like they really verified who I am in a way that like I had to do like not this, but some COVID tests over over the camera when I was traveling during COVID, and just like the difference in ID verification online versus in person, it will never compete. So to me, I would much rather do it at a test center. You're probably going to be doing your MBA at a school and not just online. I don't know for sure, but just like it's good practice in that sense, and they are way less likely to cancel your score if you really knock it out of the park. But I have heard that, like on the old score scale, GMAT 700 plus or whatever, that they were real trigger happy about canceling those and making you retake it, and that would have been heartbreaking for me. Any other questions? Or if you guys have any particular things you want to see, I'm kind of doing more verbal webinars. I don't know about next week because Christmas tends to kind of mess up the week schedule, but if you have any other like particular question types you're interested in, I'm sure I'll hit them all eventually. But I am doing these roughly once a week, so if you have things you want to see, let us know. Which section would you choose first? I did DI first because DI splits the quant and verbal skills, and I thought that would be a good warm up. I did DI, quant, and verbal. Verbal is my strongest traditionally, so I wanted to do that when I was like the most tired. So I have like a whole video about choosing like your sections too that you can check out, that I have like some tips. That is probably on YouTube. I don't know, marketing handles that, but I definitely think you got to kind of track where your energy levels are and then match your sections to that, because you will definitely be tired at some point during the 2 hours. If it's at the end, you probably don't want your hardest stuff at the end. Okay, anything else? All right. It was nice hanging out with you guys. I will see you at the next verbal webinar, hopefully. Good luck on your studies.